In 2011, Netflix made a single decision so bad it erased billions of dollars in value, almost overnight. I'm not talking about a data breach, I'm not talking about a scandal. I'm talking about something far more catastrophic, a pricing change. And yes, I know what you're thinking. A pricing change? That's what killed them? Well, buckle up, because this is the story of how Netflix, the company that revolutionized entertainment, nearly became a cautionary tale taught in business schools as How Not to Run a Company 101. Let me set the scene. It's 2011, Netflix is riding high. They've got nearly 25 million subscribers. They're the darlings of Wall Street. Everyone loves them. They killed Blockbuster, and honestly, we were all pretty happy about that. Reed Hastings, the CEO, is being hailed as a visionary genius. Life is good. And then Netflix decided to commit corporate suicide on purpose with a smile. On July 12, 2011, Netflix announced they were splitting their DVD rental service from their streaming service. Okay, you might think, that's not so bad. Companies restructure all the time. But here's the kicker. They were raising prices by 60%. 60%. That's not a price increase, that's a ransom note. See, before this announcement, customers could get both DVDs and streaming for $9.99 a month. A pretty sweet deal, honestly. But Netflix decided that wasn't working for them anymore. So now, if you wanted both services, you'd have to pay $15.98. And if you're doing the math at home, yes, that's the same math Netflix apparently forgot to do, that's a 60% increase. Now, I want you to imagine you're Reed Hastings for a moment. You're sitting in a boardroom, someone suggests raising prices by 60%, and instead of saying, that's insane, we'll lose all our customers, you say, great idea, let's also make it more complicated and inconvenient. Because that's exactly what they did. But wait, it gets better. Or worse, definitely worse. 3 months later, in September 2011, Netflix decided the problem wasn't that they'd raised prices too much. No, the problem was that they hadn't made things confusing enough. So they announced they were splitting the company entirely. The DVD rental service would become a separate company called, wait for it, Qwikster. Qwikster, with a Q and no U after it, because apparently Netflix looked at their rapidly deteriorating situation and thought, you know what this needs? A rebrand that sounds like a failed energy drink from 2003. The plan was brilliant in its stupidity. You'd have one account for Netflix streaming, a completely separate account for Qwikster DVDs, two websites, two billing systems, two queues. If you wanted to search for a movie, you'd have to check both sites separately to see where it was available. It was like they looked at customer convenience and said, how do we do the exact opposite of that? Oh, and here's a fun detail. When they announced Qwikster, the Twitter handle @Qwikster was already taken by a guy who posted pictures of Elmo and marijuana. I am not making this up. Netflix was about to launch a major rebrand, and the Twitter handle was occupied by Elmo smoking weed. You literally cannot write comedy this good. The internet predictably lost its collective mind. Customers were furious, social media exploded, Netflix's Facebook page became a war zone, people were canceling subscriptions in droves. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except the car was on fire and also somehow crashing into itself. Reed Hastings posted an apology video that became infamous. He sat there in a hoodie looking like someone's disappointed dad and essentially said, I messed up. Which, credit where credit's due, at least he admitted it. But then he went on to explain that Qwikster was still happening, which kind of undermined the whole apology thing. It's like saying, I'm sorry I burnt down your house, but I'm still going to salt the earth so nothing grows there again. The numbers were catastrophic. Netflix lost 800,000 subscribers in a single quarter. Their stock price plummeted from $300 to $53. That's an 82% drop. Billions in market value just evaporated. Reed Hastings went from genius CEO to the guy who almost destroyed Netflix faster than anyone thought possible. Wall Street analysts were having a heyday. Headlines ranged from skeptical to downright brutal. Netflix commits suicide, read one. Another called it the worst product launch since New Coke. And honestly, that's not even hyperbole. At least New Coke was just bad. Qwikster was bad and inconvenient and more expensive. So what happened to Qwikster? Well, about 3 weeks after the announcement, Netflix quietly killed it. They released a blog post that essentially said, "Never mind, we're not doing that anymore." The whole thing lasted less than a month. It was the corporate equivalent of posting something stupid online, getting roasted, and deleting it, except Netflix did it with billions of dollars at stake. But here's where it gets interesting, because somehow, miraculously, Netflix survived. Not only survived, they thrived. Today, Netflix has over 250 million subscribers worldwide. They're worth hundreds of billions. They completely transformed how we consume entertainment. They turned Netflix and chill into a cultural phenomenon. They're printing money. So how did they recover from what should have been a fatal mistake? Well, a few things happened. First, they actually listened to customers and reversed course on Qwikster. That's rare enough in corporate America to be noteworthy. Second, they went all in on streaming and original content. House of Cards premiered in 2013, and suddenly Netflix wasn't just a content distributor, they were a content creator. Third, and perhaps most importantly, they had an absolute massive stroke of luck. Their competition was comically slow to respond. The traditional entertainment industry looked at streaming and said, "That's just a fad." By the time Disney, HBO, and everyone else realized streaming was the future, Netflix had years-long head start. But let's not give them too much credit. The Qwikster debacle revealed something important about Netflix's leadership at the time. They were so convinced they were right that they didn't listen to their customers. They saw the future, streaming over DVDs, and they were absolutely correct about that. But they were so eager to get there that they tried to drag their customers along by the hair. It's actually a fascinating case study in how you can be right about the big picture, but catastrophically wrong about execution. Netflix understood that streaming was the future. They were pioneers in that space, but they forgot the cardinal rule of business. You can't force your customers to follow your vision if you make it expensive, complicated, and annoying. The entire Qwikster saga lasted about 4 months from announcement to cancellation. 4 months that nearly destroyed one of the most successful companies of the 21st century. 4 months that taught Netflix and every other company watching a valuable lesson about hubris. Reed Hastings later admitted that he slid into arrogance based on past success, which is probably the most honest thing a CEO has ever said. Most executives would have blamed market conditions or competitive pressure or the alignment of Jupiter with Mars, but Hastings just said, "Yeah, I got cocky and screwed up." There's something almost refreshing about that level of candor. Today, when people talk about Netflix, they talk about their algorithm, their original content, their global expansion. Nobody talks about Qwikster anymore, except as a punchline or a cautionary tale. It's been buried so deep in Netflix's history that you'd need an archaeological dig to find it. But every now and then, when Netflix raises prices, and they do regularly, you can see echoes of 2011 in customer reactions. People get nervous. They remember, even if unconsciously, that Netflix once decided to charge them 60% more for a worse experience. Trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild. The story of Qwikster is ultimately about arrogance, miscalculation, and the importance of keeping your customers happy even when you're trying to innovate. Netflix wanted to push everyone into the future. They just forgot to ask if anyone wanted to come along for the ride, or if they'd at least pack snacks. So the next time you're scrolling through Netflix trying to decide what to watch, remember, you almost lost all of this because someone thought Qwikster was a good name for a company. Let that sink in. Qwikster. And be grateful that cooler heads eventually prevailed. Because if they hadn't, we'd all still be going to Blockbuster. Wait, what's that? Blockbuster's dead? Oh right, Netflix killed them. Well, at least they're good at destroying something.